As you all know, Ben Shapiro is the famous, infamous even, short, fast-talking, small boy of the right. He owns the Daily Wire, possibly the largest. I actually don't know if it's the largest, but I think it actually might be the largest conservative media outlet that is not Fox News, that exists on the internet. And basically, his whole thing, since he really blew up, has been focused on dunking on trans people. Okay? Listen, since 2019, I've been saying that trans rights is going to be the central social civil rights movement discussion of our generation, if you're like a Zoomer or a millennial. And I think that's very much coming true each day that goes by. And I think it's very obvious, or it was very obvious from a mile away, if you look at what conservative pundits have been complaining about and laser focusing on and having the most success complaining about for a decade now. And for a decade now, people like Ben Shapiro have always gotten the most applause, the most views, the most likes, and the most positive engagement when shitting on trans people. Right? And I think a large reason why they did this is because trans people, as opposed to, say, gay people, are not quite as accepted, right? I think we can all agree on that. If you went on TV right now and said, gays shouldn't be allowed to get married, I think they're disgusting, yada, 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 your whole career would probably be over outside of very select circles. Our society has reached a point where typically, if you just kind of let the mask slip like that, broader society is disgusted enough to kind of just push you to the side and cancel you, and you're basically just going to become a pariah outside of conservative spaces. That obviously is not the case anymore, but we'll get into that in a moment. Back in, say, 2014, 2015, 2016, the Gamergate era, gay marriage and the topic of whether or not gay people should be allowed to have relationships with each other, assuming they're, adults having consensual, sex or relationships, that was basically just a given in conservative demagoguery, right? Like, you really didn't see a lot of conservative public figures shitting on gay people or gay marriage. At least not outside of euphemism, right? Like, they dog whistle and engage in euphemism, but outside of that, like, they're clearly homophobic. You didn't really see any more Republicans, or hell, not even Trump, actively advocating for abolishing gay marriage, because it was just seen as such a settled issue in our culture. Do you guys follow? Do you guys agree? Hypers in chat if you agree so far. The right basically considered gay marriage and the topic of whether or not gay people should be allowed to exist and have their relationships. They basically considered that lost ground for a while. Good. Seems like a lot of you guys were on the same page. That's good. However, trans people, that was not the case. Trans people have time and time again been kinda pushed to the back of the line, so to say, when it comes to activist LGBT movements, right? So oftentimes, say, I believe Stonewall was actually started by some trans people, right? Like, some of the people who started the whole Stonewall thing were trans. And despite that, because a lot of lesbian, gay, and bisexual cis people saw it as more optically expedient to sort of distance themselves from the people that think they can change their gender, and just kind of made the forefront of their movement about just, gay, bisexual, and lesbian cis people, right? And because of that, and, the long-standing kind of gatekeeping the LGBT community loves to engage in, and it really is at every level, isn't it? Right? You've got, like, lesbians and gay and bisexual people who don't want to let the trans people in, and you've got, like, the binary trans people who don't want to let the non-binary people in, and you've got the non-binary people who don't want to let the neo-pronoun users in, and, like, it's just, it's like literally layers of gatekeeping, where, like, Regardless, the trans community, not anywhere near as accepted as cis gay people are. Cis gay people still have a lot of issues that they have to deal with, particularly now. But, back then especially, there was just a big difference there, right? It was acceptable to make attack helicopter jokes publicly on YouTube as a large figure, and no one gave a shit. Even nowadays, not a lot of people are going to give a shit, depending on what audience you fostered. So with that said, Ben Shapiro basically built a large amount of his initial audience on dunking on random college students on the idea that, like, men can't be women and women can't be men. Oh, where does it say that it's Boy Scouts in the name Boy Scouts? Oh, got her. Oh, college student destroyed. Like, that was like the OG content that helped Benny Boy reach prominence. However, now he runs a massive media empire with several people under him that also have massive public followings as well as billionaire backing. You see, Ben Shapiro is as establishment and in the swamp, so to say, as it gets. He has massive amounts of funding, and now he's reached a level of comfort and confidence with his platform that he's willing to go a lot more mask off. Now, Ben Shapiro has always been anti-gay marriage. However, he was always more lenient on it. I remember one of the biggest things that started to cause Ben Shapiro's reputation to take a downturn was when he debated, so to say, Dave Rubin on his show about why he would not go to any event that Dave Rubin and his husband hosted that had anything to do with their marriage, because Ben Shapiro does not agree with them being married. He sees their marriage as heretical, I guess would be the term. As a bad thing, as like a sinful thing, right? Heresy, sorry, yeah, thank you, Enceladus. Degenerate, yeah, he sees it as degenerate. And that definitely caused him to lose a lot of followers and a lot of support from your average, like, liberal centrist types who really didn't realize how right-wing Ben Shapiro was. But now if we fast forward to today, Ben Shapiro regularly debates people on why he does not believe gay marriage should be legal. He actively supports the abolishment of gay marriage. He does not believe that gay people should have that right. And we're going to go ahead and watch a debate he had with a caller recently. It's only a 10-minute long video on this topic. Caller debates Ben Shapiro on gay marriage. Let's go.
Aaron in Massachusetts, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Aaron.
Hi, Ben. I saw the phone number on Twitter. So I'm not looking.
Oh, no. Like I said, Ben Shapiro has always been homophobic, but he wasn't open about it as much, right? When Ben Shapiro, people really started to realize, oh, Ben Shapiro is like authoritarian levels of homophobic when he actively started going on, when he went on Dave Rubin and just went on about how he does not support their marriage, and even his friends, he would not let, yeah, it became very clear at that point, and that was when, like, people started realizing, like, oh yeah, Ben's homophobic. At least that was a big thing for me as well. I didn't know Ben Shapiro was, like, homophobic. When I watched Ben Shapiro when I was younger, I thought Ben Shapiro was, like, definitely transphobic, but I didn't think trans people were, I thought trans people were, like, crazy, right? And so that wasn't a problem. Being transphobic, I didn't see that as a bigotry. I saw that as being, like, reasonable back then. And I think that's how a lot of people at the time, when Ben Shapiro was really rising to his current level of prominence, saw it.
I'm not going to argue or anything. I just have a hard time understanding when people say they want small government, but they want to make gay marriage illegal. Wouldn't it be smaller government?
Oh, no. Ben Shapiro would argue that it's actually big government to allow gay marriage, because in order for gay marriage to exist, you have to compel certain private corporations and private citizens to change their behavior in order to actually, like, accept gay marriage as being valid. So, for example, he'd be like, yeah, so what about the Supreme Court ruling that decided that, I don't even think it actually decided that you had to make the gay cake, did it? What was the determined outcome of that court ruling? I don't actually remember. I don't even think they came to a conclusion that said you have to make the gay wedding cake in that Supreme Court ruling. What was the conclusion, chat? Do any of you remember? This is a bit before I got into politics, like hardcore, so. They ruled the cake to be art and not something that could be forced. Yes, you're right, because compelled art. You can't compel someone to create or change art, because art is a form of protected First Amendment expression, yeah. So I imagine that's the argument he's going to make, which is really stupid, because what Ben Shapiro is actually arguing for is for the government that we have right now and will continue to have for the foreseeable future to no longer protect the right for gay people to get married, and in fact to criminalize it in many cases, because obviously if you falsify a marriage, that is definitely fraud of some kind, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, like you really he'll try to worm out of this because he's smart and he knows how to grift, but there is no world in which being anti-gay marriage is being anti-small government. These are antithetical positions.
To just let gay people get married, or is that something you want to be decided on the state level rather than the federal level?
So first of all, it is a state level issue, not a federal level issue. Second of all, when you talk about small government versus large government, what we're talking about when we talk about the state being involved in marriage is essentially...
Conservatives like Ben Shapiro do not give a fuck about the people, nor do they care about the idea of the people having any impact on what happens in government. You'll notice when conservatives talk about small government, when they talk about representation in government, and they talk about rights, they're talking about states. It's always the rights of the states, individual states. They hate the federal government, but they love individual state governments. Why is that, do you think? Well, it's because Republicans have never been able to hold long-term federal control. They just aren't popular enough. Republicans' only real chance outside of succeeding at a January 6th style coup to hold federal power is instead to go about it state by state. There are a lot of very hard red states. States where if it weren't for federal restrictions and federal laws that hold back how far the states can go, would be absolute nightmares and hell pits for minorities to live in. That is what these Republicans are arguing in favor of. They want all of the individual states, particularly the red ones, blue ones can be fucked, to have more power individually over the people living in them. That is their goal. They want it to be so as that if you are a trans person living in Alabama, you're fucked. And the federal government can't save you. That is their goal.
Subsidies for marriage, right? So you can make the case, you can make the small government case to go completely libertarian on marriage. And I've heard that case, and I don't necessarily totally disagree with that, right? In some ways, I would prefer, in most ways, if the argument is going to be either the state subsidizes all marriages, gay and straight, or the state subsidizes no marriages, gay or straight, I would prefer the latter, because I don't think the government should be, if the government's not going to set a moral standard, I don't think the government should set a moral standard. And we can just go completely libertarian. If you're talking about which social relationships ought to be subsidized by government, my answer is the social relationships that ought to be subsidized by governments are the ones that produce children, and that would be man, women, baby. Right? So that is the answer to the question. As far as big government versus small government, first of all, I think that dichotomy is sometimes too rough, because I want...
The idea that gay marriage should be banned or is unfair somehow because the government may give you benefits because you are married, even though if most gay couples cannot biologically have a child, though many adopt or do like what's it called, artificial insemination, and have a child that way. So even beyond that, that's stupid. But imagine thinking that is a good argument for why the state should not allow two consenting adults to get married just because they are the same gender.
Big government when it comes to...
By the way, this is every conservative. Conservatives do not believe that they should have the right to believe that being gay is wrong. Conservatives believe they have the right to live in a country, or some of them in a world, in which gay people are not allowed to exist. It's not that they don't like gay people. It's that their core beliefs center around the idea that gay people and all other groups that the progressive left believes are valid or should be more accepted are actively destroying our society, and they need to be fought. Ben Shapiro and other conservatives, as much as they may say, oh, we're libertarian, small government and everything they say naturally concludes to, oh, we need to take up arms and kill all of the leftists that are influencing the fall of the West. Because he's arguing that the left are like pushing pedophilia onto our children and like raping kids and turning them trans and butchering them. Like, where else can you go with that narrative other than, and it's time for you to pick up your weapons and do something about it? That's clearly what Ben wants.
Hardcore policing in crime-ridden areas. Is that big government? It's not libertarian. Right? I want the government to be able to make sure that crime does not rise in my area. That's not a small government policy. So I think that the question is correct use of government versus non-correct use of government. But if you're going to make a small, big government...
Basically what he's saying is big government is okay as long as they are overreaching in order to shut down what I personally view to be morally degenerate. These people don't have personal opinions or like their own personal takes. They have desires to impose their worldview on others. If other people are out there in the world living lives that do not fall in line with what Ben and those that agree with him view as moral, then you are committing a crime against existence, and you do not deserve to exist. If Ben Shapiro could have Earth to himself, but knew that there was a colony of like gay space communism on the moon just minding its own business, he would not be able to allow that. He would insist that that entire moon colony be nuked from orbit, because their worldview is such that it can't exist. They don't just have different opinions. Those that disagree with them cannot coexist with them, ever. That is their worldview. That is their goal. That is one of the core tenets of their ideology. Hey, Xander Corvus.
Government dichotomy. The question really should be whether the government should be involved in marriage at all. Now, when I say that gay marriage, I don't think the government should subsidize that or the government should, quote unquote, not legalize it. What I don't mean is that you're criminalized if you go to your local church and get a piece of paper. If you're two dudes and you go to your local Unitarian church and you get a piece of paper and you put it on your wall, is that a criminal activity? No. Should it be a criminal activity? No. But that's not the same thing as the state issuing you a license that says that you are a married couple using the same word that has been historically applied to a man and a woman.
So it's literally just, I personally really hate the fact that the government would see these icky gay people as having valid relationships. I don't care if they're consenting adults. I think they're icky, and I personally want the state to say they are not valid. I do not think the state should be allowed to say that they are valid. I think the state should say the opposite. Notice, by the way, the truly libertarian position is for the state to not care as long as no one is getting hurt. Ben is trying to insist that it is somehow a non-politically neutral position for the state to allow people to get married. That the natural state of things is for only straight people to be allowed to get married, and that it is an aberration or a political bias for the state to allow it, when in reality it is simply, objectively, more libertarian of the state to allow it. And to enable it even. What's more libertarian than not just the state staying out of your way, but helping you do something?
Because the goal of society is to incentivize man, woman, children.
Yeah, I could see you not subsidizing any marriage. That would seem probably fair.
By the way, these are the people that say, why are we giving money and lethal aid to Ukraine when we've got people here, homeless veterans and whatnot, that we need to take care of? And then, like, whenever they're talking about any issue that has to do with domestic policy, they're like, oh, fuck all the poor people, fuck the American people, fuck them, no subsidies, no tax breaks, no goddamn tax refunds, no, fuck that, no social security, no free health care. Fuck poor people. Get back to work. Die from COVID. Remember Ben Shapiro making his videos about, like, in literally, like, June of 2020, telling people they need to go back to work and COVID's not going to be a big deal and it's all a made-up hoax? You guys remember that? Good times.
I think that the marriage...
I mean, the only case in favor of subsidizing... Yeah, I mean, Aaron, I'll let you finish in 1 second. The only case to subsidizing marriage is that society does, in fact, have a pretty strong interest in the family unit. It does have an interest in you producing children, considering that we need children in order to pay for all of the vast social.
These people are so totally against giving money or any type of free medical treatment or money to the families of the 9/11 first responders. Holy shit. Yeah, they absolutely are not in favor of giving money to the families of the ones that have died, giving free, paid-for health treatment to the ones that are sick and dying, or, frankly, just paying out the ones that ended up with long-term, long-lasting, lifelong damage from what they had to do saving people and doing first responder shit during 9/11. For those of you guys that don't know, like, if you were a first responder at the site of the World Trade Center at 9/11, like, one of the things that apparently was the biggest problem that you wouldn't even think of was, like, asbestos and, like, all sorts of weird, like, shit that grows in the walls, mold and chemicals and whatnot, just kind of got aerosolized in the air, and the first responders breathed it in, and a lot of them got fucking cancer. Yeah. Like, years later, you're right, Heavy Gretel, like, not even like, oh, it was a decade or 20 years later. It was like 4 or 5 years later. Yeah, you guys should really look at Jon Stewart doing his baller-ass speech in favor of helping them get health care. It was fucking awesome. Great speech. Jon Stewart's pretty based. Not always, but generally pretty based.
Social welfare nets that we have built. And society does actually have an interest in providing a framework for monogamous male-female relationships. These are the foundation stone of any successful, durable society.
Not going to qualify that, by the way. That is objectively not true, by the way. The idea that monogamous, straight relationships are the cornerstone of any successful society, this has never been true historically speaking. Like, non-monogamous relationships outside of the West have literally been, like, the norm of some of the biggest, most long-standing, 1,000-year-long lasting empires of all time. Like, there are, like, countless empires that existed for hundreds, thousands of years, had immense amounts of wealth in, like, Africa and the Middle East that definitely did not practice, typically speaking, monogamous relationships. Hell, like, in Greece and Rome and whatnot, they practiced gay sex all the time. As long as you weren't a bottom, you weren't gay. Like, he's just objectively wrong. Yeah, like, there's literally stories in the Bible about non-monogamous couples. Lot literally gets drugged and fucked by his daughters and starts, like, a whole new tribe of humans after God, like, airstrikes Sodom and Gomorrah. Probably one of Ben Shapiro's favorite Bible stories.
Yeah, definitely.
He's just wrong.
We should actually, like, try to get people to have kids. But I think that the marriage issue for gay people is just they want their relationship to be seen as valid. I don't know if there's another way.
I agree with you.
And Ben Shapiro is going to lie here and say, and sure, that's fine. Ben Shapiro does not personally see gay relationships as valid and has said to the face of his friend who is gay, that he does not see his marriage to his husband as valid, okay? Like, Ben Shapiro is not a libertarian. I have a friend who is actually a libertarian. I'm not kidding. He's actually through and through. I've known him for over a year now. Like probably 2 years now. Over 2 years now, yeah. I've known him for over 2 years now. He is a real, unironic libertarian. And when you meet a real, unironic libertarian... Yeah, it's Ethan. When you meet a real, unironic libertarian, you know they're a real, unironic libertarian because they rant all the time about how pissed they are that fascists and neo-Nazis and conservatives use the label of libertarian to hide the fact that they're fascists, Nazis, and conservatives. Real libertarians, even right libertarians, are not anti-gay marriage, anti-gay relationships, anti-trans, or so on. Real right-wing libertarians literally believe that gay people, trans people, black people, all minority groups that typically the right is opposed to, should be left on their own to do their own thing. Do not bother them. Do not fuck with them. Do not take away their rights. Do not try to impede on them as you would not anybody else. What they're against is the idea of as Ben Shapiro is trying to pretend he's against here, but he can't avoid letting slip in that, like, oh, I do, by the way, consider gay marriage to be reprehensible. He can't keep that out of his rhetoric. Like, an actual right libertarian would be like, I just don't think that the government should be able to tell them they can't grow weed. I don't think the government should tax them pretty much at all, because I think taxation is theft. And I think the government should have no say in what they do on their land, or what their land is like. They should be allowed to burn their trash or do whatever. Like that's like what an actual right libertarian would say. Oh yeah, and lots of guns. That's what actual right-wing libertarians say in regards to gay people, trans people, and other marginalized groups. Like, they don't say they're libertarians and then go on some screed about how minorities of some minority group, pick your poison, is somehow ruining the West, you know? Like, every time it's a Nazi when they do that, or just a fascist in general.
So first of all, I don't think it's in the states. I don't think it's up to...
No, Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't even about gay people. They were just rapists and weirdos. Like, they were just eating shit and, like, pissing in each other's mouths and raping each other and, like, sexually assaulting random people against their will non-consensually. And they tried. I don't think they did not succeed in raping that angel, I don't believe. I don't remember them actually succeeding in raping the angel. They just really wanted to rape the two angels. And it was two angels, not one. Yeah, no, the people of, I believe it was Sodom, wanted to rape the two angels that came to visit Lot. And they were like, nah. Yeah, they just threatened to rape them. They wanted to. And Lot was like, no, you're not ravaging my angelic host, my angelic guests here, or whatever. And yeah, I really do need to do some more funny Bible storytellings on Cyrus's stream. That would be fun.
To the state to, first of all, if you're looking to the state to decide the validity of your relationship, you're doing life wrong, just generally speaking. I don't look to the state to validate my marriage with my wife. I've always been bewildered by this. Okay. Like this idea that, oh my...
No, this is bullshit. Listen, marriage, conceptually, it obviously means a lot more than the piece of paper that's validated by the state, but for your marriage to be validated by the state is very significant, you know, when you live in the state, you know? There are a lot of institutions that will be allowed to not recognize your marriage as valid, which will significantly harm your quality of life, if the state does not verify your marriage as just as valid as anybody else's marriage. This is just true. Not to mention, just sort of philosophically speaking, when gay marriage is already, you know, allowed right now, federally speaking, any motion that would try to lessen the allowedness of that is just objectively less libertarian. Like, it is objectively anti-gay marriage to take any action that would lessen that right. Don't let these conservatives try to talk their way out of the fact that they're arguing in favor of taking people's rights away and trying to dress it up as libertarian somehow.
My God, well, now the state is validating my marriage. Like, I didn't get married to my wife because I wanted whatever tax, actually penalty there was attached to getting married. I have two marital documents. I have the one from the state, which is required in order for us to you know, file jointly as a couple and other tax issues.
Did you guys know that I'm an ordained priest for the Church of the Latter-day Dude? I could, like, literally just, like, officiate your marriage. You know, I could just go to the courthouse with one of you, just write on a piece of paper and just say, yep, and you're married. I have that power. It's pretty cool.
And then I have the one that I actually care about, which is my Jewish document that I got from the rabbis.
Can I bless stuff? Yes, I can. And it actually does harm the undead to be in the proximity of anything that I bless.
Right, that's the one that actually says that I'm married. And they're actually on two separate dates. I was married secularly in the United States months before I was married in Israel, you know, under Jewish law. The one that allowed me to sleep with my wife was the one where I got married under Jewish law. Right, so that's the one that I cared about. And that I do care about with regard to my wife. So Anybody who's saying, I want the state to sanctify my marriage because the state is the arbiter of good and evil,
No one is arguing that the state is the arbiter of good and evil, and that is why the state should sanctify it. The state is the arbiter of power. And unfortunately, in our world, might makes right the vast majority of the time. And so if the large power-holding organization that controls the landmass you exist in and determines the rules you live under and the taxes you pay and the rules that all of your neighbors and coworkers and friends and family live under is all of a sudden getting more anti-gay, then yeah, it's probably something to be concerned about, maybe. No, I'd say so. I'd definitely say so.
I'm very uncomfortable with the state being the arbiter of good and evil to the extent that, like, you look to them to sanctify your marriage. It's a weird thing. And when you...
Okay. The state should reflect our moral positions in an ideal world, and we should always fight for an ideal world. So one of the lies about conservatism, or one of the lies that conservatives will tell themselves, is that people on the left are just as selfish and self-centered as they are, right? Have you ever gotten into a debate with a conservative where you're arguing for something that is objectively good and objectively helps people and objectively makes the world better, and they start arguing for like something that just objectively makes the world worse in every single way, and you're like, why are you arguing for this thing that objectively makes the world worse? How can you not see that, like, why are you, like, are we in upside down land? Do we live in another reality? And what a lot of conservatives tell themselves is that there is no changing the system because not even the left wants to change the system. Much like the right does, they think the left just wants to mold the system to fit their own desires, that the left just wants to make themselves the wealthy ones, that the left just wants to make their political narrative the one that's on TV all the time and the one that's everybody is fed constantly and gets banned if they don't believe. You can see it when you see what they do when they take power. Elon Musk took over Twitter and immediately started banning people that didn't agree with him, banning people that made fun of him, banning journalists that called him out. He shut down Twitter Spaces and brought them back a day later because there was a big Twitter Space that was being made by banned journalists talking about how he'd had a meltdown and banned them unwarrantedly. Like, he's basically just doing what he and the rest of the right accuse the left of doing, but the left doesn't actually do that. They live in this deluded world where they think the left is lying to them about wanting to do good things for the right reasons, and they've convinced themselves that they're being lied to by the left, and the left are actually trying to, just like them, do some nefarious self-centered thing because they're projecting that onto a lot of people on the left. And that is why they seem so incredulous when you argue with them. It's why they're so cruel, and they seem like why they seem so morally dedicated to trying to take you down. They think you're lying to them about wanting to make the world a better place to make them look bad. That's how a lot of they think you're trying to moralize to make them look like assholes, when in reality they're just assholes.
When you get married, you don't typically get married before the state. You get married before God and witnesses. But so there's that. As far as the idea that the state should do...
Sure, God. All right. If you believe in God, I suppose.
Do that. That you actually verge on actual religious problems at that point, because if the state is now an alternative to...
So this is a big reason why I like to go Reddit atheist every once in a while. The vast majority of Christian Americans and more authoritarian, like, I know Ben is Jewish, but he's like hyper-Zionist, like authoritarian Jewish. Like, hyper-Christian, hyper-religious types here in America oftentimes tend to be not just of the opinion that they should have the right and freedom to believe what they believe and celebrate their religion and worship and pray as they like, but that the state not being codified in such a way that also assumes that that religion is real is also against their rights, right? So they believe that America, being secular in the way that it writes laws, is anti-Christian. Because they think God exists, and thus if the state does not write laws and build itself with the assumption that God exists, then it is an anti-Christian country to believe God isn't real. If you believe God's not real, or you do things that Christianity does not approve of, you are anti-Christian and a threat to Christians.
Sanctification, like the state is now a sanctifying body, right, providing legitimacy. What you're really talking about now is the state as moral arbiter. Okay, fine. Well, if the state's going to be moral arbiter, then I get to make the countervailing case that the state only has an interest in monogamous male-female relationships. The state has no interest whatsoever in male-male, female-female relations because, again, no children are naturally produced from such relationships.
By the way, Ben Shapiro believes all sex that does not produce a child is immoral, so I guess if you want to live a life where every time you have sex you have to get the girl pregnant and then raise a kid, then you can agree with Ben Shapiro and support his worldview. If personally that sounds like the world you want to live in, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't need to make an argument for why this is stupid. Because I think most people imagining living in that world just shuddered. And I think that's enough of an argument alone.
Now you can make the case that some people have said, well, what about marriages between an old man and an old woman where they're not producing children? Okay, that's saying that because not all cars.
What does he mean by the government subsidizing gay marriage? So when you get married, there are certain tax like breaks that you get or some shit like that. I actually don't know because I'm not married. Let me look at it. Does marriage bring financial benefits? While money should never be the reason to marry, tying the knot can be good for your mutual bottom line. Your social security benefits may get a boost. One of the most significant advantages of marriage is eligibility for social security, spousal, and survival benefits. First, as a married couple, you're each eligible to collect on your own social security benefit or up to 50% of your spouse's benefit, which is greater. This can be a financial plus if one of you is a higher earner. In addition, a widow or widower is eligible to collect up to 100% of the other's benefits. Plus, Social Security can provide important benefits for a minor child whose parent is deceased or disabled. So it's literally just Ben Shapiro being anti-good things again. That's good to know. I did mention, by the way, these are the same people that say, why are we providing lethal arm to Ukraine when there are people here who need our help, and then say Social Security bad. You could get an income tax break or not. When an unmarried person includes a partner on their health insurance plan, that benefit is taxable. For married couples, premiums to cover both are tax deductible. A non-working spouse can contribute to a spousal IRA as long as the working spouse has enough earned income to cover the contribution. These contributions will have the opportunity to grow tax deferred and may also be a deduction. Like, all of this is just basic rights that, like, you should have if you're married. Like, if everybody's going to have access to this who's, like, a cis, straight, married couple, then why not gay people? Beginning in 2020, if you inherit an IRA from your spouse, you can basically treat it as your own and postpone taking required minimum distributions until the year you turn 72, potentially giving your assets more time to grow tax deferred. So for the most part, this is like helping you out if like your partner dies tragically, or like you have a kid and you both die. Like, all right, more orphaned kids. Because yes, believe it or not, Ben, gay people can raise kids. That is, there are ways that's happened. And Ben is just advocating for evil again.
Are completely functional. That the definition of cars includes horses. That's not the same thing.
Okay.
Right? You can make the case that those relationships are of less value than young male, young female. That doesn't change the definition of male and female in the same way, obviously.
One thing that I find very funny is that Ben Shapiro is like, somehow he's like, oh, more marriage, more people need to get married young and have kids, yada, yada, yada. It's good for the country. It's good for the country. Despite the fact that he argues that immigration is bad for the country. He used to argue it was bad for the economy and immigrants committed more crime, but then enough lefties managed to catch him on that, like when he would try to debate college students that don't know anything, and called him out like, Ben, this is, every economist agrees, like, that's not true. Not only do immigrants objectively not commit more crime than native-born white people even, but they also end up contributing more to the economy. and immigration ends up acting as like one of the this country's greatest resources for the economy, and they'll completely like say, it's bad because immigrants vote more Democrat. That's why, not because they're brown. I promise it's not because they're brown. Yeah, it's all just none of their ideas for the reasons they claim they believe them makes sense. If they believe these things for the reasons they claim to believe them, if the reasons they claim to believe the things they believe are all racism and bigotry, then it all makes sense. All the puzzle pieces fit together. But if you believe what they say they believe, if you believe what they say is the reason they have their beliefs, none of it makes sense. It's all contradictory and like, wait, how can you believe in small government, but also gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married, but also you think that these drugs should be criminalized, and also you're in favor of for-profit prisons and more policing, and also you're against the left protesting, but you're in favor of the right protesting, and you're in favor of capital punishment and the death penalty? Like, but this makes no sense unless you bring up, oh, you just hate brown people and gay people and stuff. Oh, now it all makes sense why you believe all these things.
Yeah, I think there's other benefits, like being able to make medical decisions and leaving the estate when you die. Is that something that you think you would let gay people do?
Those are the benefits, by the way. That we just Googled it. Those are the benefits of getting married.
Sure, why not? Why not?
We just Googled it. In America, those are the benefits you get when you get married. So he's basically, because it looks good, he's walked back his entire position so that he can basically sit on this meaningless government subsidies for marriage talking point. We just read what happens when you get married, and what benefits the government gives you. Ben's just lying about what the government does for you if you get married. Yeah, I'm fine with the whole IRA and like transfer and the whole inheritance of estate and income and tax benefits. That's fine. That's fine. But not this other thing that I won't specifically name. That's just sort of an ethereal concept of the government giving benefits to gay marriages. Yeah.
So first of all, I think you could always do that. You can sign a contract that allows you to do that. I can sign a contract with my business partner that allows him to visit me in the hospital, and then I just can.
Okay, signing a legal contract with your gay partner that guarantees your funds go, or like your material possessions go to them, is obviously not the same as the state ensuring you have the right, and that the state will ensure legally that your partner has the right to your things when you die, and vice versa, and all of the other things that we went through before. Like, he's literally just trying to find ways to weasel out of, well, here's why it's totally libertarian and based and totally not authoritarian for the state to not see gay marriages as valid. Totally. Marriage is a contract outside of all the churchy bullshit. That's literally all it is. Yeah, of course it is, but you have to understand, when you argue with a conservative like Ben Shapiro, he literally believes in, like, a magical place called heaven, where a super powerful Super Saiyan being called God exists, who has determined magically what is right and wrong. I'm sorry, but that is what he believes, if he actually is not lying about his religious beliefs. So he believes that a guy who is all-powerful and created the universe, who exists in another plane of existence, reality, realm, physical place, who knows, another land, heaven, presumably, is making the decisions as to what is right and wrong. That is his justification. If you really whittled it down, he could just say, God said so. Listen, I know Jews don't believe in heaven or hell, or wherever the fuck God. What do Jews believe in then for the afterlife? Where do you go when you die if you're Jewish? Does Ben just think his soul gets, like, obliterated when he dies? That's kind of sad. Oh yeah, you're right. It's just like, it's like purgatory. Well, cool.
Convey it to the hospital. You can have
The rest I said about God determining what is right and wrong in his mind is still accurate, though.
civil unions for 20 years in this country. Civil unions were the way that things, I mean, this was the argument. The argument started off as, don't prosecute us for things that we do in the privacy of our bedroom. And everybody in the United States is like, okay, fine.
You'll notice, by the way, oftentimes when conservatives talk about or try to summarize like civil rights movements historically, that's how they like to frame it, right? Like, gay people are just like, hey, we'd like to not be prosecuted for, you know, gay sex. Just having sex consensually as gay adults in our home. And then everybody was totally like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, totally. The United States, yes, everyone was like, yeah, it's totally fine. It wasn't fine, guys. So one of the things that conservatives desperately fight against is education, because they do not want there to be any more education in regards to previous civil rights movements in history, other than, yeah, they said, can we do this thing? And then everyone was like, yeah, sure, let's do this thing, because that's all that happens, right? Because they do not want there to be any because they recognize the massive amounts of parallels between past civil rights movements and protests and events in history and today. And the more educated you are on the past, the more you realize you're being fucked over in the present. And they don't like that. That's not good for Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, and his wallet. So it is their prerogative to eliminate education on topics like this. To sum up civil rights movements as, they asked if they could have a thing and everyone was like, yeah, sure, but now they're all uppity and they want more now, and that's unreasonable. That's basically what their propaganda is. This is obviously not true. We literally have GOP politicians in power now actively vying to pass laws that would make gay sex illegal, as well as other forms of non-conventional penis and vagina sex illegal. They're also trying to make what's it called? Contraceptives illegal, like condoms, birth control, the pill, and morning after pill, all that stuff.
Because the truth is that long before Bowers versus Hardwick in 1989, long before Lawrence versus the gay Lawrence versus Texas.
Also, imagine thinking that everyone's still like, yeah, sure, gay people can live their own lives. Ben does not believe that gay people should be allowed to do what they want in the privacy of their own homes. Conservatives do want cunnilingus to be illegal.
The sodomy case in 2000. Long before that, sodomy laws had basically been unenforceable in the United States for like a very long time. They were on the books, but they really were not enforced, because how do you even enforce that?
I love this. So people like Ben Shapiro will desperately try to find... This is probably a complete lie, if I'm being honest, knowing Ben. He's probably just outright just lying out of his ass right now, because who the fuck's going to check? But conservatives will literally try to argue. My favorite example of this was... listen, I know you guys don't like Destiny, but this was an OG Destiny debate, okay? It was an OG Destiny debate from back in the day, where he was arguing with a whole panel of conservatives about the voter ID laws they were trying to pass in one of the Carolinas. It was either North or South, I don't remember. And the Supreme Court had determined that, I believe the quote from the Supreme Court was, "This voter ID law seems to be surgically targeting black and brown people to keep them from voting." And they struck it down as unconstitutional. And the panel of conservatives Destiny was arguing with was like, oh yeah, well, it doesn't say brown people can't vote, or that they're trying to keep brown people from voting the law, do they? And Destiny's like, the Supreme Court literally said, I don't care what the Supreme Court said. What does the law say? The law doesn't say that. The law doesn't say. And now you literally have like the ultimate version of this, where it's like the law literally says, that you're not allowed to have gay sex, but here's a bullshit explanation for why actually gay sex was totally fine and the gays were just making a big hubbub about nothing. Okay.
Really. So those laws were largely going without enforcement. Most Americans were not in favor of enforcing such laws. Okay, then it was, we want civil unions so that we can visit our gay partners in the hospital. And everybody was kind of like, okay, fine, sure, fine.
Sure. Everyone was just like, yeah, fine, sure, fine. Yeah, that's totally how it went. Yep, that's how civil rights movements go, guys.
And then it went to, well, now we want marriage. We want it to be called exactly the same thing. And people went, wait, hold up a second. And then the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it was when they said, okay, now we want our relationships to be called marriages, that then everybody was like, wait, hold on a second. You gays are going a little too far now. And that is when they started. Okay, so now we know in Ben's worldview, the gays were all good and nobody had a problem with them up until they started asking for their relationships to be called marriages. And that's when everybody was like, whoa, cool your jets, you degenerates. We can't allow that. That's going to destroy the West. Like, dude, imagine living in not Ben Shapiro's world, because Ben Shapiro's a grifting piece of shit who knows he's lying. I mean, the average Ben Shapiro fan's world. Imagine living your life and thinking that is how the civil rights movement went. How Stonewall went. Like, yeah, black people were just like, they couldn't use the same bathrooms as white people and stuff, but like, and they couldn't like go to the same schools or classrooms or drink at the same water fountains or swim at the same pools, and they were like second class citizens pretty much. But like, you know, then they asked like, hey, can we like be treated equally? And everyone was like, oh yeah, sure, that's cool. And then they were treated equally. But then black people asked, hey, can you teach that white people are worse than us in school? And then white people were like, whoa, that's not cool. Everyone was like, whoa. And that's where we are now. That is what Ben Shapiro thinks the civil rights movement was. Well, not what he thinks it was, what he would say it was.
Overruled the people and said, okay, well, we're just going to do it anyway. And then it went to, and if you in your own life, in your business, do not sanctify our marriage, you are now a bigot. And that slide went really, really quickly.
Yes.
So I'm perfectly willing to.
That is, yes. Treating people who are differently because they are different, despite the fact they're not hurting anybody or doing anything wrong, is called bigotry. That's bigotry. That is literally what it is. I can't wait for Ben Shapiro in like a year to be on a show like, yes, I am a bigot. I'm so sad the left has made the word bigot such a dirty word. I think more people should be bigoted. I guarantee that's what we're going to hear Ben saying. Like, either Ben's going to retire because the right has gotten too insane and there's too many Nazis that want him dead in the space that he occupies. Because, like, Ben doesn't even do a lot of conservative IRL engagements anymore. Because last time he did a big one, Nick Fuentes and a bunch of grapers, like, harassed him in person to like call him a Jew and stuff because he's Jewish. Because like something you have to understand is the craziest far right people hate Ben because he's Jewish, but he's fine with allowing them in his sort of circle because unlike the left, the right cares about winning, and he recognizes that the right, like the really far right Nazi groups, basically serve a very important purpose to his, you know, to his bottom line, to his goal. And either he'll realize that he is contributing to the growing mass of anti-Semitism in this country and he will get scared of it and quit, or he will go even deeper and get even crazier and we'll have like Ben Shapiro, the Jewish Nazi, and that'll we'll have the Jotzi. That's the best I can get. And it'll be a whole thing. We'll be a whole new arc. It'll blow the whole Kanye revelation out of the water.
To say that anybody should be able to have anybody visit them in the hospital. I don't care. You should be able to will your property to whomever you want. I really don't care. It makes no difference to me. It's when you start setting a state standard for what marriage constitutes that I have to sound off. Because again, the argument that was constantly made about gay marriage is how does my gay marriage affect your marriage? And the answer is it doesn't. What does affect my marriage and what affects every marriage is the state's definition of marriage. Right? The state.
As I said, guys, the right thinks it is an imposition on their rights if... Let me give you guys an example of how the conservative thought process works on this. Let's say you have day one, and on day one, in the classroom, the teacher says all of the students with brown hair can have a cookie. And so all the students with brown hair go up to the front of the class, and they get a cookie. But then all the students with blonde hair start saying to the teacher, wait, we want a cookie too. And the teacher's like, okay, you can have cookies from now on, starting tomorrow. And the day after that, the teacher starts giving cookies to the brown-haired and the blonde-haired students. Let's imagine this is just a class of blonde hair and brown-haired students for the analogy. And then all of a sudden, the brown-haired students are like, whoa, 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 hold on. So you're saying they get to have cookies now, just like us? So you're saying those brown-haired students, or those blonde-haired students, sorry, are just as deserving of a cookie as us? This is an imposition on our rights. That is basically the logic here. It is if the brown-haired students, in response to the blonde-haired students also being able to have a cookie, said, wait, the implication that you think they also deserve to have a cookie is an insult to us, and thus an imposition on our rights, and you're hurting us. It's a lot like a sovereign citizen. Like, you know those sovereign citizen videos where it'll be like a lady arguing with a cop, and like the cop will start like putting her in handcuffs, and she'll start screaming, "You're raping me." And it's like, it's a lot like that. It's a lot like that. That's basically what conservatives do when they say they're being oppressed in some way.
The state does a lot of things, and the state's activities affect everyone. I mean, we're all members of the society.
To being arrested.
You can make that argument out literally anything. On a completely different score, not morally equivalent in any way. You could easily say, back in 1840, if you were living in the South, how does my owning a slave bother you up in Massachusetts? And the answer is, well, when society sets rules about slavery, that says something about the entire society. Now, again, I'm not making any sort of
So Ben accidentally let the mask slip here. You can literally see how frustrated he is here. This is the exact same argumentation that conservatives made to justify slavery back in, back during the Civil War era and right before it. Their argument was that individual states should have the right to determine whether or not they're slave states or not. And if the Union can determine no, slavery is not allowed, or make a position that there's only allowed to be this much slavery, then that means that this is somehow that would, if at any point the federal government said this state is not allowed to be a slave state, the pro-slavery people said, the conservatives said, that meant that their rights to own slaves, even in pro-slave states where they were allowed to have slaves, was being infringed on. Just the concept of there being non-slavery states meant that the government was saying slavery was bad, and that was an imposition on the rights of those slave owners. The same argument those conservatives back then made.
Of equivalence between gay marriage and slavery, not even remotely the same thing.
Yeah, there is actually an equivalence there in the state saying you're not allowed to get married and the state saying you are not a person, you are property. There actually is some level of equivalence there, I would argue. There's a reason why the same group of people that tends to agree slavery was bad and argue in favor of civil rights also tends to agree that gay marriage is good and should be protected. Isn't that odd, how there's so much crossover there?
The point that I'm making is that societal rules are very different from the question of how does someone's individual activity affect me on a personal level.
Yeah. So if you want it to be, let's say, gay marriage illegal, does that not sound like Congress making laws with respect to establishment of religion?
I'm not saying that it should be illegal. You should be able to do whatever you want in your state. I'm saying that the government does not have to give you a subsidy for purposes of a thing that has no societal...
No, he's been arguing that the government should not say that what you have is a marriage and should not give you a certificate of marriage and should not consider your marriage valid. He said that the government should not validate gay marriage. That is what he has said multiple times. He's going back and forth. We already looked up what benefits you get from being married, so we've already caught him on that lie, and now he's jumping back and forth between I have no problem with gay people being in relationships and signing contracts that allow them to transfer blah, 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 but even though those are all the benefits you get from being married. So he is actually against those things, but not, I guess. So what he says he's actually against is the state saying gay marriage is valid, but now he's saying... it's just the government giving subsidies, which is just a ethereal non-concept he won't name. It's literally just him saying nothing, but making it sound fancy enough that stupid people think he's saying something worth listening to.
In which society has no interest. Society doesn't give you special tax benefits if you are living, quote unquote, in sin with a member of the opposite sex. Right? Like there are a lot of they're polygamous relationships. Is it up to the government to now sanctify those?
Yeah. So if there was no subsidy,
I don't know or care what he's talking about here. The government should not say that 2 or more consenting adults should not be able to get married because religious belief.
and no tax breaks for being married.
Remember, conservatives believe that a secular government is an their religion government, objectively.
Then gay marriage would be totally fine. Because that sounds reasonable to me.
I mean, if there are no subsidies and no tax, you're asking two separate questions. One is on a societal level, should people be able to go down to their local?
What are these subsidies? I'm so curious what these subsidies are. We read it's Social Security. He's just talking about Social Security. Everybody pays into Social Security. When I got my first job at 16, they literally showed on my paychecks how much of my paycheck was taken out to go to Social Security. Everybody pays into that and has is this like a, what is he? Yeah, I don't know what he is that what he means by subsidies? Social Security? Because all that does is take care of the widower if one of them dies, and takes care of the next of kin if both of them die. Which is, once again, that thing Ben said he has no problem with. So what does he mean by subsidies? I honestly don't know what he could mean by this. It's just this ethereal concept he wants to make up to try to claim that the government is giving married couples, I guess, yeah. Basically what I think he wants is I think he wants his viewers to imagine the government is giving married couples $100 or $200 a month. Much like, say, a single mom might get if they're raising a kid. They might get a check from the government to help them. But that, I don't, as far as I'm aware, you don't get paid by the government for being a married couple without kids. Yeah. You're trying to make it seem like he actually holds these beliefs. It's just homophobia with pretty vocabulary. I make it seem like he actually holds these beliefs for the sake of explaining my position that his worldview is stupid if he actually does believe these things. But then I follow it all up with, by the way, though, he is the leader of, the head of the Daily Wire and is making big bucks and is just lining his own pockets with all this propaganda.
Unitarian church and get a document. You should be able to do whatever you want. I don't care. When it comes to the question of should government subsidize in any way male-male relationship.
That's probably true, but there's no point in watching the video if you're not going to take the points seriously. Wait, how am I not taking the points seriously? What? What do you mean? I'm tearing apart why he's dishonest. Ben is a liar and a dishonest grifter, and I'm pointing out the evidence as to why. Not only the fact that, only no Harvard graduate is stupid enough and lacking in enough knowledge about the world to honestly believe the things that he said about history and, the economy and biology and sociology, and criminology. Not just that, but also the fact that, he has always followed the money. Yeah, he's a grifter. Obviously, I'm going to focus mainly on calling out the fact that he's a dishonest liar. I don't know how that can be interpreted as me not taking the point seriously. I guess you're a Ben fan, but okay. Maybe you think Ben has a point that gay people are degenerate or whatever, but I personally don't.
On the same level of male-female relationships, my answer is no, because society does not have the same interest in those two things. This is why marriage has been historically reserved and defined, not even reserved, defined as man-woman, because the entire basis was a man and a woman might produce a child. You need legal restrictions around that.
Ben does know that a man and a woman don't need to be married to produce a child, and that gay couples can adopt and also do artificial insemination, right? You know that that's a thing. Okay.
Protect the child and to protect the woman mostly. I really appreciate the call, Aaron. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show is continuing right now. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be taking your phone calls. Plus, we will be getting into the Democrats'
Okay. Well, he's doing his little shill at the end of the show. With that said, Ben Shapiro is a lying grifter, okay? The guy does not actually believe the vast majority of the things he says. And at the end of the day, if he does believe it, if you were really to whittle him down, like point by point by point, like pointing out how he's wrong, pointing out where he's lying, pointing out where he's misled, you would really get down to his core argument being, my God says this, this, and that, and I'm right because I agree with him, and he said so. And really, at that point, what can you do or say? Like, I don't want to go full Reddit atheist here, but like, that is just objectively illogical. You know, you can't really argue in good faith with that. All you can really do is just do like Reddit late tip Fedora atheist memes and piss them off, right? Anyway, with that said, if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and commenting down below. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you want to see more from me, consider subscribing and ringing the bell icon and turning on all notifications so YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload a new video. And of course, if you want to see more from me online, you can follow my social medias, all linked down below in the description, as well as supporting me financially so that I can continue to make this awesome content for you. And you can support me financially by donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or donating, joining, or subbing, or supporting me financially through other means on YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, and Patreon. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.